through mud up to their knees. The environment in which they work is incredibly difficult and challenging. And Kiin, who was one of the journalists who went to Baidobo, to Afgoy, all across the country to report on these climate-related disasters. Kiin herself, well, she was mainly brought up in Kenya because her family fled Somalia in the civil war in the 1990s, and she was brought up in Dadaab. And then she went home not that long ago and has become one of Bilan's journalists. And Kiin, you asked if we could have this picture. And why did you want this picture?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. I'm so happy, I'm so grateful to sit in front of you and to have this opportunity. Actually, this photo, and there was a time last week we have visited Baidobo, which is a southern part of Somalia, and we take this photo out of the city, and this is an old woman which is carrying a jerrycan of water. And actually, there was a flood that happened, and up to the beginning of November there. So there were a lot of problems that they faced. The IDB camps of Somalia. So she's a part of the IDB camps, and there's a water and there's a lack of water, a clean water there. So she's going out of her city and to get a clean water for her family. So that was the reason we have taken this photo. I met her out of the Baidobo city. She's across a long distance to get a clean water.
And Kiin, there were some pictures in the video from when you went to cover the drought in your home, the place of your birth where you were born, in Jubaland. How was it for you to report on climate change and what it has done to the place where you were born?
And actually, at the end of 2020, I go back to my birthplace, Jubaland, especially Kismayo area, where I have met a lot of people who fled across Jubaland areas because of famine and droughts. So there's a lot of pain. There's a history that we have written about it, which guardian have been broadcasted. So it was so painful to meet that this situation. In Jubaland people are most evicted people about the droughts, and likewise the floods.
And thank you very much, Kiin. And now we can move to the next stage of the panel. So can I invite the other two panelists here? One is Faizah Mohammed Ali, who's a young climate activist from Mogadishu, Somalia. And also Adrian Topoti from the mining company Base Titanium, who we heard from first yesterday. So thank you very much to both of you. And one thing that I'd like to talk about, and I don't know whether you find this as well, that in my days at the BBC, people always thought that climate journalism, even though it's very important, it's the biggest threat to our world, but that it was very boring. And whenever anyone mentioned doing a climate-related story in news meetings, the editors would just roll their eyes because they thought it was so boring or because they didn't understand the science. So it was a bit like if you cover Africa for mainstream Western media, unless you're going to do a story about, still to this day, conflict or famine. Somalia, they love stories about Somalia because it has all of these things. Or if it's a story related to Kenya, as I'm sure you've heard many times before, they love stories about things like lions. So it's so narrow. So it's like when it comes to climate change, I think one of the challenges is how do you make those stories interesting? And also there's a lot of studies that show that people, because they're frightened about climate change, there's news avoidance. They don't want to look at those stories. And given that we have a representative here, Adrian Topoti, from the mining sector, which many people would accuse of being basically the source of a lot of pollution and the source of elements that cause climate change, how do you manage your relationship with journalists who might see you, the mining sector, as basically a source of pollution and part of the problem? How do you manage that?
Thank you, Mary. Before I come to your question, if you allow me, in just a minute, let me just summarize again in high level base titanium. A heavy mineral sands company mining in Kwale has been in existence for the last 10 years. We mine heavy mineral sands, which consists of 3 minerals, ilmenite, zircon, and rutile. We so far employ just under 2,000 employees, 99.9% being Kenyan. That number having grown steadily. At the mine inception, we had about 65% Kenyan, and the rest were expatriates from outside the country. And so far, we've mined about 1.6 million tons of the mineral. And in this whole story, why I am highlighting this is that we did begin our mining operation with sustainability in mind. And we cover land of about 1,600 hectares. Of this, we've mined on 1,100 hectares, and we have rehabilitated fully to full restoration about 750 hectares already. The rest remaining should be able to be done within the next 18 months that we still have our existing license. So coming back to your question, we as a company have always, from the inception, project inception, we embedded sustainability, building resilient communities, and deliberate biodiversity and ecological restoration in our operations.
If a journalist comes to you and comes to your company and asks you, because often companies, they've been accused of things like greenwashing or spinning a line that they're environmentally friendly, but in fact they're not. And if a journalist comes to you with evidence or asks to really look on the ground to do very, very detailed studies of your work and to speak to communities who've been affected, how does that make you feel? Do you feel defensive, or are you happy to be open and say we're definitely not perfect and we have things to learn?
Well, we as a company have a very open policy regarding journalists and the environment and how sustainably we mine. Our mine site is always open. A lot of the media houses present here have sent journalists to our site. They have been taken round, and any questions they have always received responses. But the beauty about what we do is we do not use any chemicals in our mining. We only use water. The major part of what we do in our mining is perhaps the environmental degradation, because you mine over a huge stretch of land. But that's what I said earlier. We have so far done quite well. 81% actually of our land that we have already disturbed has already been fully restored.
And turning to you, Faizah, you live in a country that is one of the world's worst affected by climate change, even though it does not contribute very much to the problem. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do to work in the environmental sector in Somalia? And also, how do you get journalists interested in your work?
Thank you, Mary. Before I answer your question, I'm going to explain briefly Somalia's climate change. As you all know, Somalia is a path on recovery from decades of civil war and absence of a state of control. However, climate change affects increasingly. Climate change poses on effectively increasing the influence of people's life. And the droughts and the floods are highly influencing effectively in our people. So Somalia's climate change is affected by geographical location near the equator, and that makes the variation of temperature between north and south of the country. So the climate change in Somalia has affected the people that are vulnerable. Those are living the IDBs actually, or other the regions of Somalia. So when it comes to solution, as in a youth of Somalia, we do awareness of the community. And also, we do engagement. The people, those are affected, the floods. As we all know in Somalia now, there's a floods at this moment. Those are affected highly. So we help the people, we made engagement there, and also the reporters we give, they have to understand the climate change, the impact. When they understand the impact of climate change, they can report. But if they didn't understand anything about climate change, it is too hard to report that.
Yes, and do you, as a climate activist, explain to journalists the science behind climate change? You show them examples? Because it's not the easiest thing to cover as a journalist, because there's a lot of science involved, there's lots of disinformation involved.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, as in, there's one training we had in Baidawa. We bring the reporters of there. We are teaching how the climate change impacts the people. That will help them to make a good report for that influence of, as you all know, especially Baidawa is affected floods. So we had given training or capacity building in environment and climate change for that people. So now they're understanding what's climate change, how it affects the people. When they understand all that things, it's good to them to prepare a report for that.
And I must say, because I'm often in the Somali territories, and this year for the first time, I've noticed people using that, they use it in English, they use the term climate change, and they never used to talk about climate change before, so journalism must be making a difference there. And before we go to the Q&A, Kiin, you, like last week, you were in Baidobo in the mud. You were also in a dangerous boat in Afgoi. You've been to the droughts. You've been all over the place, you and the young team. And now, thanks to KEG, you've been doing some placements with Kenyan media, and you've been in Nation Group, and you've been working for a bit with the Climate Desk. Do you think that climate desks are a good idea in newsrooms, or do they mean that people just push climate to one side?
Thank you so much, Mary. Yes, climate change can be benefit in a newsroom, and they can be dedicated to cover a climate change's effects, and it will be recognized to environmental challenges. it would be good to have a special task for climate change, so it will be contribute to get more information to aware the people, to give more awareness about the climate change and the impact of climate changes.
And do you know if any Somali media houses have climate desks?
Somali media mostly they talk about the other viruses of the informations, like or what can I say about what is going on in the country, but they don't mostly focus about the social issues and what is going about the climate change issues. So we can say we Bilan are the only media that focus about the climate changes, because we do different pieces of climate changes, and we visit different parts of the country, like Afgoye, that we have made about how floods and the river floods affected the farmers, and also the sea level is. We also made an essay about the sea level is that affected the fishes of the country. So we don't have a special desk, but the Bilan is only the media that trying to get information about the climate changes, and we are honored to be the media that only talk about the climate change.
And it's true, because so much of Somali media concentrates on either the conflict or the endless political crises, and the fact that Bilan is telling so many untold stories, and that so many of them, climate change is part of those stories, because it's such a big problem. Adrian, in terms of the media and its relationship with sectors such as yours, do you see the media as something to be afraid of, to be avoided, journalists as the enemy because they're going to attack you? Or do you see them as partners, or some kind of, that there can be a friendly, productive relationship rather than a combative one?
Certainly, the relationship we have with the media as Best Titanium is a friendly partnership, because we have on many occasions opened up the mine site to a lot of the questions from journalists. They get to understand how the operations run, from land acquisition all the way to mining, all the way to even land restoration. They get to understand that we get to take journalists to land that has already been mined, which has been restored, and which fauna and flora has already been restored. You know, you get to see the butterflies are back, the amphibians, and all other kind of animals. So for us, media is really a partner. We just walk the journey with them. They ask any questions they would have. And in many of these things, there's a science to everything. As long as we expose the media to the full cycle of mining and explain that, look, there may have been an impact here because of the mining, but then there was an economic benefit here, there's a social benefit here, and now we are in the environmental benefit stage, where we are restoring the environment back to its near original form. So the media is certainly our partner, and certainly in this new stage where Best Titanium is supposed to shut down in a few months, it is only an operational closure anyway. So we would love that we also use that opportunity to document our success stories about how we have enabled those communities and gotten benefit for the country.
Thank you, and I must say it's pretty brave of you to come to a hall full of journalists. I'd be quite scared if there was a conference that had a climate change theme for the media. It's good. It's very good to have you here.
Well, BASE is quite proud of its sustainability efforts.
Yeah, and Faizah, for organizations like the BBC, one way they're trying to do stories about climate change is they have a journalism that's called solutions-based journalism. I must say, as a news journalist, I really don't agree with it, because I think our job is to report what's going on and other people can come up with solutions. But anyway, that's a different issue. But in Somalia, are there examples of people who are doing things related to climate change to try to fix the problem, not just collect the rubbish and try to save people's lives in floods and droughts? Is there anyone who's doing interesting innovation?
Are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mary. As we all know, Somalia is affecting climate change so badly. So there's one thing that I'm encouraging and I'm supporting. There is a clean up campaign that they are, every Friday do the Somali youth as in a volunteer. You know, lead the beach. They do lead the beach. They clean. So, and they made as in a volunteer. But it's not taking a rubbish only there. You know, it is too hard to clean the beach. So that's the campaign that they are doing every Friday, the youth of Somalia.
Yeah, so it's great. You see every Friday young people going and cleaning up the beaches.
Early in the morning even.
Yes, yeah. And they do it for, as you say, voluntarily. And I've seen quite a lot of people beginning to use solar panels and things like that as well. As we don't have a huge amount of time, it would be great if we could have a quick question and answer or comments from the floor. So if anybody has any questions or comments, there's one over there, and there's one here, and there's one here. So maybe we can take 3, yeah.